In the dazzling decade of tail fins and chrome, not every beauty became a bestseller. From bold innovations to marketing misfires, these stunning cars of the 1950s promised greatness, but crashed hard instead. Here are 35 spectacular machines that look like winners and failed miserably. Number 35. 1959 Studebaker Lark. In 1959, the Studebaker Lark arrived with a bold promise. It was the car that was supposed to rescue a dying automaker. Studebaker, once a prestigious name in the American automobile industry, had been struggling for years with shrinking market share and outdated designs. The Lark was their Hail Mary, a compact car introduced just as Detroit was still churning out bloated land yachts. Smaller, lighter, and more fuel-efficient than its rivals, the Lark was an early response to shifting consumer sensibilities, particularly in the wake of the recession of 1958. Its tidy proportions, decent fuel economy, and affordability struck a chord. That year, the Lark sold over 126,000 units, an impressive feat for a company on life support. But that initial burst of optimism proved dangerously short-lived. While the Lark gave Studebaker a rare moment of relevance, the company simply didn't have the resources to evolve the car fast enough to stay competitive. Lacking the deep pockets of the Big Three, Studebaker cut corners on updates and facelifts. By the early 1960s, the Lark's styling looked dated, and its engineering lagged behind newer compacts from Ford and Chevrolet, such as the Falcon and the Corvair. Even worse, quality control issues and dealer support paled in comparison to the well-oiled machines of Detroit's giants. Another blow came from internal instability. Management turnover, labor troubles, and a dwindling dealer network further eroded confidence in the brand. Studebaker tried to inject new life with V8-powered Larks and marketing stunts, but nothing stuck. By 1963, Studebaker shuttered its South Bend plant, ending U.S. production altogether and relocating briefly to Canada before ceasing operations entirely in 1966. The Lark stands today as a bittersweet example of missed opportunity. It was a forward-thinking car that arrived at precisely the right moment, but with the wrong company behind it. What began as a rare success story in a decade of corporate decline became yet another chapter in the slow demise of an American original. Number 34. 1958 Buick Limited. In 1958, Buick revived the Limited nameplate for what was intended to be the pinnacle of its luxury lineup. With massive proportions, extravagant chrome accents, and the kind of over-the-top detailing only the late 50s could justify, the Limited was a rolling symbol of opulence. It was offered in both sedan and convertible forms and cost nearly as much as some Cadillacs. Its starting price hovered just below $5,000, depending on trim. The Limited was Buick's way of saying it could compete with the best of GM's luxury division, and from a styling standpoint, it did not hold back. Underneath the hood, it packed a potent 464 cubic inch nail-head V8 producing over 300 horsepower. It rode on a long wheelbase and was loaded with features: power steering, power brakes, electric windows, automatic transmission, and a plush interior trimmed with brocade fabrics and genuine wood appliques. The dashboard looked like something pulled out of a sci-fi rocket lab, with sweeping lines and aircraft-inspired controls. It was a show car for the road, a vehicle intended not just to transport, but to impress. However, Buick launched the Limited at the worst possible time. The economy was reeling from the recession of 1958, one of the deepest economic contractions of the post-war era. Buyers were suddenly more frugal, and the lavishly priced Limited, costing nearly as much as a Cadillac Series 62, seemed excessive, even to affluent customers. Moreover, its styling was polarizing. With nearly 70 pounds of chrome adorning the body and some of the most flamboyant rear-end treatment seen in the decade, it crossed the line from luxury to garish for many consumers. Buick managed to build only about 7,400 Limiteds in that single model year. Sales were so poor that the model was discontinued after just one season. In hindsight, the 1958 Buick Limited became a cautionary tale of excess, how a car could be too much, even for an era known for more is more. Today, it is a rare collector's item, celebrated for its audacity, But at the time, it was a stunning miscalculation that left Buick licking its wounds. Number 33. 1958 DeSoto Adventurer. The DeSoto Adventurer of 1958 was the kind of car that turned heads the moment it rolled onto the street. With enormous tail fins, shimmering gold, anodized trim, and dual 4-barrel carburetors, it looked and sounded like a machine built to rule the road. Positioned as DeSoto's top-of-the-line performance luxury coupe and convertible, the Adventurer was everything a late 50s American car was supposed to be: flashy, fast, and unapologetically bold. Beneath the hood, it came equipped with a powerful 345 cubic inch V8 that produced a robust 345 horsepower, 1 horsepower for every cubic inch, a marketing dream. But despite its dramatic styling and potent engine, the Adventurer was launched during one of the worst possible moments in automotive history. The recession of 1958 slammed the brakes on consumer spending, especially in the upper-middle-class market that DeSoto was counting on. Americans were tightening their belts, and suddenly, a glitzy performance coupe with a thirsty V8 and a near $4,000 price tag seemed excessive. Even worse, quality control at Chrysler Corporation, DeSoto's parent company, was slipping during this period, and reliability issues plagued several models across their brands. The Adventurer, despite its curb appeal, was no exception. Build quality inconsistencies, questionable engineering decisions, and rust-prone body panels soured the experience for many early buyers. Sales for DeSoto in general dropped by nearly 60% that year, and fewer than 3,000 Adventurers were produced in 1958. It became increasingly clear that DeSoto was losing both its footing and its identity. The Adventurer should have been a breakout success, a halo car to revitalize the DeSoto name. Instead, it became a symbol of a brand on its last legs. Though the Adventurer limped on for another year, DeSoto itself was terminated by Chrysler just 3 years later, in 1961. Today, the 1958 Adventurer is a rare and stunning survivor of its era. But back then, it was a beautiful misfire, overstyled, overpriced, and ultimately out of place in a country facing economic anxiety. Number 32. 1958 Lincoln Continental Mark III. In 1958, Lincoln introduced the Continental Mark III as a bold return to the ultra-luxury segment, but what was meant to be a status symbol ended up nearly bankrupting the division. The car was monumental in both scale and ambition, stretching over 227 inches in length and tipping the scales at more than 5,000 pounds. It was built on a unique unibody platform and designed to outdo anything coming from Cadillac, Imperial, or even Rolls-Royce. With its formal roofline, massive slab sides, and iconic blade-like rear fins, the Mark III was unmistakably American, but not necessarily beautiful. Styling for the Mark III was a love-it-or-hate-it affair. The quad headlights were set into deeply scalloped bezels, the grille looked like a massive steel fortress, and the car's vast expanses of chrome gave it a showroom presence, but also a visual heaviness that divided opinion. Inside, it offered plush appointments with leather or brocade upholstery, power, everything, and a dashboard that looked like a Cold War control panel. A massive 430 cubic inch V8 engine paired with a turbodrive automatic transmission propelled the Mark III, but with all that weight, performance was far from brisk. Despite its grandeur, the timing of the Mark III's release could not have been worse. The United States entered a sharp recession in 1958, and luxury buyers were suddenly rare. Additionally, the Mark III was hand-built on a separate assembly line, leading to sky-high production costs that Ford could never recoup. Sales were abysmal, with Lincoln losing thousands of dollars on each unit sold. Compounding the problem, Lincoln was forced to share showroom space with Ford's less expensive models, diminishing the car's exclusivity. By 1960, the financial bleeding had become unsustainable. Lincoln's reputation took a hit, and the division was nearly axed entirely. Only a total reinvention in 1961 with the smaller, suicide-door Continental saved the brand. The Mark III of 1958 remains a case study in how excess, when untethered from market reality, can result in spectacular failure. Stunning in ambition but doomed by timing, it nearly took Lincoln down with it. Number 31. 1958 Ford Edsil. Few automotive failures in history are as legendary as the Edsil, launched by Ford in 1958 with a marketing budget and media fanfare rarely seen before or since. The Edsil was supposed to fill a gap between Ford and Mercury in the company's brand hierarchy, offering buyers a bold and innovative new choice in the mid-price market. But from the moment it was unveiled, the Edsil struggled with an identity crisis, public ridicule, and disastrous timing. Ford spent over $250 million developing and launching the Edsil, a staggering investment for the time. It came in 4 series and multiple body styles, including sedans, coupes, convertibles, and wagons, and featured innovations such as the Teletouch push-button transmission system mounted in the steering wheel hub. Power came from large displacement V8 engines, and on paper, it seemed like a formidable product. But in execution, the Edsil was plagued by problems. The styling was immediately controversial. The vertical horse-collar grille, meant to evoke a classic radiator look, was widely mocked by the public and the press alike, with some comparing it to a toilet seat or worse. Mechanical issues also dogged the car from the outset. Quality control was inconsistent, as Edsils were assembled at various Ford plants not dedicated to the brand, leading to mismatched parts and reliability concerns. Worse still, the Teletouch transmission system proved finicky and expensive to repair. Perhaps most damning of all, the Edsil was introduced during the economic recession of 1958, when American consumers were pulling back on discretionary purchases. Instead of flooding showrooms with buyers, Ford dealerships saw unsold Edsils piling up. Ford had expected to sell 200,000 units in the first year, but moved fewer than half that. By 1959, the brand was in crisis, and Ford pulled the plug entirely by 1960. The Edsil remains the textbook case of how hype, poor execution, and bad timing can ruin even the most well-funded projects. It was bold, it was different, and it was a total commercial catastrophe. Today, the Edsil is a collector's curiosity, a beautifully strange reminder that not all risks lead to rewards. Number 30. 1958 Packard Hawk. By the time the Packard Hawk debuted in 1958, the once prestigious Packard name was already on life support. What had once been a symbol of American engineering excellence had, by the late 1950s, become a badge of corporate desperation. The Hawk was the final attempt to inject life into the dying Packard brand, and though it was visually striking and technically competent, it failed to capture the public's imagination or dollars. Based heavily on the Studebaker Golden Hawk, the Packard Hawk shared much of its underpinnings, but attempted to differentiate itself with a unique fiberglass front end, a more luxurious interior, and distinct trim. The car's nose, which featured a wide, shovel-like grille flanked by bulging headlight housings, was polarizing even by the flamboyant design standards of 1958. Some admired its bold styling, while others said it looked like a vacuum cleaner or a catfish. It certainly stood out, but it wasn't the kind of standout that made buyers line up. Under the hood was a potent, supercharged 315 horsepower V8, which made the Hawk one of the fastest Packards ever built. Performance was strong for the era, and the car featured a plush interior with leather upholstery, full instrumentation, and power accessories. Yet for all its attributes, it couldn't escape the shadow of its declining brand. Only 588 Packard Hawks were produced, making it one of the rarest production models the company ever made. Buyers were increasingly wary of investing in a nameplate they suspected would not be around much longer, and they were right. The Hawk turned out to be Packard's final standalone model before the brand was officially retired. In retrospect, the 1958 Packard Hawk is admired by collectors for its rarity and gutsy design, but at the time it was seen as a final, awkward gasp from a legendary company that had lost its way. Stunning in power and ambition, it was a last shot that missed the target. The Hawk didn't just fail, it marked the end of the road for Packard. Number 29. 1957 Cadillac Eldorado Brougham. In 1957, Cadillac unveiled the Eldorado Brougham, a hand-built, ultra-luxury sedan that pushed the boundaries of automotive opulence and of Cadillac's balance sheet. With a price tag of over $13,000, it was more expensive than a Rolls-Royce Silver Cloud, a staggering figure in an era when a typical car cost around $2,500. The Eldorado Brougham was intended to be Cadillac's flagship, a technological tour de force meant to elevate the brand above all others. In terms of styling, features, and craftsmanship, it succeeded. The car boasted futuristic design elements such as quad headlights, a stainless steel roof, rear hinge suicide doors, and a pillarless hardtop look. Inside, the cabin was more luxury lounge than automobile, featuring genuine Mutin carpeting, brushed stainless trim, and innovations like automatic memory power seats, a magnetic glove box, and a self-opening trunk. Cadillac even included vanity accessories, such as a perfume atomizer and a drink tumbler set. At its core, the Brougham wasn't just a car, it was a rolling showcase of what was possible. Under the hood, a powerful 325 horsepower V8 provided ample motivation, but what really set the Eldorado Brougham apart was its pioneering air suspension system. Designed for an unmatched ride quality, the self-leveling air suspension was ahead of its time and, sadly, plagued by reliability issues. Owners quickly discovered that the system was prone to failure, expensive to repair, and difficult for most mechanics to service. Many ended up replacing it with conventional coil springs, defeating one of the car's signature selling points. Despite its innovations, the Eldorado Brougham was a commercial disaster. Only 704 units were built over 2 years, and Cadillac lost thousands of dollars on each one. It was too expensive, too complex, and too out of step with market realities. The car's failure forced Cadillac to rethink its strategy, and the Brougham was quietly dropped after 1958. Today, the Eldorado Brougham is revered by collectors for its rarity and bold vision. But in its time, it stood as a gleaming monument to Cadillac's ambition and a painful reminder that innovation alone does not guarantee success. Number 28. 1957 Renault Delfine. In 1957, the Renault Delfine made its official entry into the American market, riding a wave of post-war enthusiasm for European imports. Compact, economical, and stylish in a quaint way, the Delfine was pitched as France's answer to the Volkswagen Beetle. At first glance, it seemed like a smart choice for urban dwellers and frugal buyers looking for a sensible alternative to Detroit's chrome-laden giants. It boasted a small footprint, an affordable sticker price, and promised fuel economy that was light years ahead of the American V8 sedans dominating the roads. The Delfine featured a rear-engine, rear-wheel drive layout and a feisty little four-cylinder engine displacing 845 cubic centimeters. But with just 32 horsepower, it struggled to reach 60 miles per hour in less than 30 seconds, making even modest highway driving feel like a gamble. Performance aside, what truly crippled the Delfine in America was its questionable build quality and lack of durability. The thin sheet metal rusted quickly in humid or salted environments, and the car's electrical system was notoriously finicky. More damning, however, were the stories that circulated among dissatisfied owners. From failing gearboxes to vapor lock in hot weather, the Delfine quickly developed a reputation as fragile and unreliable. U.S. service centers were often ill-equipped to repair the car, and parts availability was a challenge. Even basic maintenance was made difficult by the Delfine's unusual design, including its unconventional cooling system. Renault managed to sell over 100,000 Delfines in the United States by the late 1950s, but initial popularity gave way to widespread customer regret. Publications such as Consumer Reports and Time magazine called out the car's glaring flaws, with Time eventually labeling it one of the 50 worst cars of all time. The 1957 Dauphine might have been a charming city car in France, but in the American market, it was woefully underprepared. It looked the part, but underneath, it couldn't withstand the rigors of American expectations or driving conditions. A cautionary tale of global ambition, the Dauphine was stunning in promise, but miserable in execution. Number 27. 1957 Hudson Hornet. By the time the Hudson Hornet reappeared in 1957 under the American Motors Corporation umbrella, it bore little resemblance to the powerhouse that once dominated NASCAR in the early 1950s. After Hudson's merger with Nash in 1954, The combined entity sought to reduce costs by consolidating production and design. As a result, the 1957 Hudson Hornet was no longer a distinct model, but rather a rebadged version of the Nash Ambassador, dressed up with slightly different trim and badging. While the Hornet name still carried some weight, especially among enthusiasts who remembered its racing pedigree, the car itself failed to deliver on that legacy. It featured a 327 cubic inch V8, which, on paper, offered respectable performance, but the body was bulky and the styling uninspired. Gone was the aerodynamic step-down design that had made earlier Hornets famous, replaced by a more upright, boxy silhouette that lacked character. The public noticed, and not in a good way. Buyers were quick to recognize that the Hudson was now essentially a Nash in disguise. This badge engineering left a sour taste in the mouths of loyal customers who had admired Hudson for its independent thinking and engineering prowess. The Hornet had once been a symbol of innovation and dominance. Now, it was a corporate compromise riding on borrowed bones. Sales reflected the brand's downward spiral. Only around 4,100 Hudsons were sold in 1957, a steep decline that underscored the public's lack of enthusiasm. The Hornet couldn't compete with the flashier, better-funded offerings from the Big Three, and American Motors saw no point in continuing a nameplate that no longer moved metal. By the end of the model year, the Hudson brand was officially discontinued. The 1957 Hudson Hornet wasn't just a failure, it was a sad farewell to one of America's most innovative car makers. Dressed in someone else's clothes and carrying the weight of past glory, the final Hornet fizzled rather than roared. It remains a poignant reminder that brand equity can't survive without substance. Number 26. 1957 Packard Clipper. In 1957, the Packard Clipper returned to showrooms in what many hoped would be a revival for one of America's most storied luxury car brands. But what arrived instead was a poorly disguised Studebaker, wearing Packard badges and the tattered remains of a once glorious reputation. After the merger of Packard and Studebaker in 1954, financial troubles mounted quickly, and by 1956, Packard's Detroit plant was shuttered. With no Packard manufacturing base left, the company resorted to building Packards in South Bend, Indiana, right alongside Studebakers. The Clipper name, once reserved for Packard's mid-level offerings, had been repositioned as its main brand identity during these final years. Unfortunately, the 1957 Clipper looked nearly identical to its Studebaker siblings, with only minor trim alterations to justify its elevated price tag. This didn't fool consumers, especially longtime Packard buyers who expected distinction and exclusivity from the marque. Instead, they were offered what many viewed as a dressed-up economy car. Mechanically, the Clipper wasn't terrible. It came with a 289 cubic inch V8 and a twin Ultramatic transmission, which gave it reasonable performance for the day. But in a field dominated by bold, chrome-heavy styling and technological gimmicks, the Clipper's conservative design and pared-down features felt underwhelming. Its interior was functional, but lacked the flair expected from a luxury nameplate. The market responded with cold indifference. Fewer than 4,800 Packards were sold in 1957, an astonishing drop from the brand's earlier glory days. The Clipper name, meant to evoke prestige, now only reminded buyers of what Packard used to be. The damage to the brand was so severe that it became impossible to recover. In many ways, the 1957 Packard Clipper marks one of the saddest chapters in American automotive history. It wasn't an ugly car, nor was it mechanically incompetent, but it symbolized the hollowing out of a once great name, reduced to badge engineering and financial desperation. For Packard, this Clipper was less a lifeboat and more a farewell note. Number 25. 1957 Mercury Turnpike Cruiser. The Mercury Turnpike Cruiser made its flashy debut in 1957 as the brand's boldest attempt to capture the spirit of futuristic motoring. Meant to celebrate Mercury's participation in the Florida Turnpike's grand opening, the car was an unabashed celebration of technology, highway culture, and space-age excess. With tail fins, chrome, and gadgets galore, the Turnpike Cruiser was a spectacle from every angle. Its designers packed it with eye-catching features that made it feel more like a concept car than something you could drive off a dealer lot. One of its most talked about innovations was the retractable breezeway rear window, which could lower to provide extra ventilation, an odd but intriguing design choice that set it apart from anything else on the road. The roof also featured twin flight control, air intakes above the windshield, and the dashboard was filled with push-button controls and a futuristic seat-o-matic memory system for automatic seat positioning. It even came with a deep-dish steering wheel and a tachometer, more common in sports cars than full-size sedan. Under the hood, the Turnpike Cruiser offered a powerful 368 cubic inch V8 paired with a Mercury automatic transmission. Performance was solid, and ride quality was smooth, thanks to a longer wheelbase and advanced suspension. On paper, it had all the makings of a flagship success. However, its excessive styling and niche appeal worked against it. Buyers were overwhelmed by its complexity and polarizing looks, especially the overdone front grille and rocket tail rear treatment. The recession of 1958 also hit Mercury hard, and buyers flocked to more affordable, restrained alternatives. Priced at nearly $4,000, the Turnpike Cruiser was too expensive for most and too outlandish for those who could afford it. Fewer than 16,000 units were sold in its debut year, and by 1959, the model was quietly dropped. Though it remains a beloved oddity among collectors today, the 1957 Mercury Turnpike Cruiser failed to find mass-market traction. It was a brilliant showcase of futuristic ideas that simply arrived at the wrong time and in the wrong package. Number 24. 1957 Ford Fairlane 500 Skyliner. The 1957 Ford Fairlane 500 Skyliner was a mechanical marvel ahead of its time, an audacious experiment in automotive design that captivated crowds but confused consumers. Its claim to fame was its fully retractable hardtop roof, a first in mass-produced cars, which folded neatly into the trunk with the push of a button. This complex system used over 600 feet of wiring, 7 electric motors, 4 lock motors, and a web of relays and switches. On paper and at auto shows, the Skyliner looked like the future had arrived. The engineering feat drew enormous attention when it debuted. No other American manufacturer had dared to build a retractable hardtop on such a scale, and the Skyliner stood out in a sea of soft-top convertibles. It was part of the upper-level Fairlane 500 lineup and came equipped with upscale touches, including chrome trim, padded dash, and an optional V8 engine that offered decent performance. Yet, despite the technological wow factor, real-world usage exposed serious shortcomings. The retractable mechanism, while ingenious, was prone to malfunctions and required meticulous maintenance. It also consumed nearly all of the trunk space when folded, leaving little room for luggage, an issue for the kind of road trips American families love. If the roof failed mid-cycle, few mechanics had the knowledge to fix it, often leaving owners stranded with a half-open car. The Skyliner was also heavy, and its added weight dulled both handling and fuel economy. At a base price close to $3,000, it was significantly more expensive than the standard Fairlane or even some competitors' convertibles. Though Ford sold around 20,000 units in its first year, interest waned quickly. By 1959, production had dropped sharply, and Ford discontinued the model altogether. The 1957 Ford Skyliner remains an engineering icon, a daring swing for the fences in a decade full of ambition. But its complexity and impracticality turned it from headline-grabbing wonder to niche novelty. It was a car too clever for its own good, and ultimately, a stunning failure masked in brilliance. Number 23. 1957 King Midget Model 3. In an era dominated by chrome-laden giants and V8 engines, the 1957 King Midget Model 3 took an entirely different route, one of simplicity, thrift, and minimalism. Manufactured by Midget Motors Corporation of Athens, Ohio, the King Midget was marketed as the lowest-priced car in America. It was an ultra-compact, two-seater runabout aimed at budget-conscious buyers and hobbyists who wanted affordable personal transportation. At just under 300 inches in length and weighing less than 600 pounds, the Model 3 was practically a toy compared to mainstream cars of the day. Its powertrain consisted of a single-cylinder, 9-horsepower, air-cooled engine mounted in the rear, connected to a simple automatic transmission with no gears to shift. The top speed was around 50 miles per hour, though achieving that required a strong tailwind and a lot of patience. Still, its fuel economy was impressive, over 50 miles per gallon under the right conditions. For its loyal fans, this was more than a car. It was an exercise in efficiency and mechanical purity. However, for most American drivers in 1957, the King Midget was a hard sell. It had no doors, limited weather protection, and minimal safety features. Its size made it virtually invisible on highways dominated by large sedans and pickups, and the car's low power made merging or climbing hills a nerve-wracking experience. Although it could be ordered fully assembled, it was also available in kit form, which made quality wildly inconsistent from one car to another. Sales peaked modestly during the late 1950s, but never broke into the mainstream. As America's appetite for performance and prestige grew, the tiny King Midget seemed more like a novelty than a viable transportation option. By the late 1960s, tightening safety and emissions regulations effectively killed the concept. The 1957 King Midget Model 3 was a quirky, idealistic response to the excesses of its era. It promised mobility for the masses, but ended up as a fringe curiosity. While undeniably clever, it failed miserably as a commercial product, proof that minimalism too can miss the mark. Number 22. 1956 Dual Ghia. The 1956 Dual Ghia was the epitome of Hollywood elegance, a glamorous blend of American muscle and Italian styling that turned heads wherever it appeared. Built as a transatlantic collaboration between Dual Motors Corporation in the United States and Carrozzeria Ghia in Italy, the car married the brute force of a Dodge V8 with the delicate hand-sculpted curves of European coach building. At a time when American luxury meant bulk and chrome, the Dual Ghia offered a sleek, tailored silhouette unlike anything else on the road. Powered by a 315-horsepower Dodge Red Ram Hemi V8, the Dual Ghia wasn't just beautiful, it was fast. Its performance rivaled many American sports cars of the era, and its interior was just as refined, featuring rich leather upholstery, full instrumentation, and hand-finished detailing. Priced around $7,500, it was a car built for celebrities, not common consumers. Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, and even Ronald Reagan were counted among its owners, giving the car an aura of exclusivity few vehicles could match. But despite the glamour, the Dual Ghia was doomed from the start. Production was complicated, involving partially assembled bodies shipped from Italy to the US for final completion, which made each unit labor-intensive and expensive to build. Dual Motors lacked the infrastructure and funding to scale operations, and quality control varied due to its hand-built nature. The price tag, while justified by its craftsmanship, limited the car's appeal to a very narrow market segment. Only 117 Dual Ghias were produced between 1956 and 1958. Once that short production run ended, no follow-up model was ever released, and the brand quietly faded into obscurity. For all its style and star power, the Dual Ghia simply wasn't a sustainable business. Today, the 1956 Dual Ghia is a prized collector's item, a snapshot of mid-century opulence and ambition. But in its own time, it failed miserably as a production car, too costly, too rare, and too complex for a lasting legacy. It remains one of the most beautiful failures of the decade. Number 21. 1956 Continental Mark II. The 1956 Continental Mark II was not just a luxury car, it was a statement. Crafted by Ford's newly formed Continental division, the Mark II was envisioned as a bespoke flagship to rival the world's most prestigious marques, including Rolls-Royce and Mercedes-Benz. Ford spared no expense, aiming to elevate the Continental name into a league of its own, far above even Lincoln. With hand-built precision and limited production, the Mark II was designed to be the most elegant and refined automobile America had ever produced. Every Mark II was assembled with obsessive attention to detail. The body panels were hand-fitted, and the paint, available in dozens of custom mixed shades, was polished multiple times for a mirror finish. Inside, the cabin featured the finest materials money could buy. Scottish leather, deep pile carpeting, and real walnut or lacquered trim. Air conditioning and power accessories were standard, and each car was test-driven for hundreds of miles before delivery. Under the hood sat a powerful 368 cubic inch Lincoln V8 paired with a turbodrive automatic transmission. The car rode on a heavy-duty frame and provided a supremely smooth and quiet ride. But all of this exclusivity came at a steep price, just over $10,000, more than a Rolls-Royce Silver Cloud, and nearly double the cost of a Cadillac Eldorado. Despite its beauty and craftsmanship, the Mark II was a commercial disaster. Ford reportedly lost over $1,000 on every unit sold, and fewer than 3,000 units were built between 1956 and 1957. The car's understated styling, while elegant, lacked the flash and fins Americans were craving in the mid-50s. Additionally, launching a luxury model from a brand new division confused buyers, many of whom still associated the name Continental with Lincoln. In 1958, the Continental division was dissolved, and the Mark II quietly disappeared. Today, the 1956 Continental Mark II is recognized as a masterpiece of design and engineering. But in its day, it was a stunning car that failed miserably, overbuilt, overpriced, and tragically misunderstood by the market it aimed to conquer. Number 20. 1955 Studebaker President Speedster. In 1955, Studebaker introduced the President Speedster as its top-of-the-line model, a rolling declaration that the independent automaker could still compete with the styling and power of Detroit's finest. With its dramatic two-tone or even three-tone paint schemes, lashings of chrome, and bullet-nose front end, the Speedster was impossible to ignore. It was the first Studebaker in years to wear the President name, a badge once reserved for the brand's most elite offerings. Under the hood, the Speedster carried a 259 cubic inch V8 engine, producing 175 horsepower, respectable for the time. Buyers could also option a 4-barrel carburetor that bumped output to 185 horsepower. The car came fully loaded with standard features that were optional on most competitors, including power steering, power brakes, white-wall tires, dual exhausts, and a padded dashboard. The interior was a highlight, with quilted leather seats, engine turn trim, and a full set of 12 gauges adorning the dash. Despite its impressive specifications and eye-catching design, the Speedster struggled in the marketplace. Priced at around $3,200, it was more expensive than many better-known rivals from Ford and Chevrolet. And while its styling was bold, Studebaker's design language was already being criticized as dated by the mid-50s. The company lacked the budget to redesign its platforms as frequently as the Big Three, and many consumers saw the Speedster as flashy window dressing on an aging body shell. Studebaker produced only 2,215 Speedsters during its single-year run. It was meant to be a halo car, one that would boost showroom traffic and brand prestige, but it failed to deliver either. While it did earn praise from the automotive press, it couldn't reverse the company's financial decline. The 1955 Studebaker President Speedster is remembered today for its flair and its role as a last gasp of optimism. But back then, it was a commercial misfire, stunning, ambitious, and ultimately unable to save a struggling automaker from its slow fade. Number 19. 1955 Chevrolet Nomad. The 1955 Chevrolet Nomad was one of the most visually striking station wagons ever produced, blending the sleek roofline of a sporty coupe with the practicality of a family hauler. Inspired by a concept car shown at the 1954 GM Motorama, the production Nomad was part of Chevrolet's all-new Tri-5 lineup that also included the Bel Air, 210, and 150 series. It shared the same chassis and mechanicals as the Bel Air, but stood out with its distinctive wraparound rear glass, slanted B-pillars, and ribbed aluminum tailgate trim. With its two-door configuration, powerful V8 engine options, including the newly introduced small-block 265 cubic inch V8 and upscale interior, the Nomad was more than just a wagon. It was meant to appeal to buyers who wanted style and performance with everyday utility. The car came well-equipped for the time, offering power brakes, power steering, and even a power window for the tailgate. Yet, despite its stunning appearance and press acclaim, the Nomad was a sales disappointment. Buyers were puzzled by the two-door wagon format, which looked great but was less practical than four-door wagons offered by Ford and even Chevrolet's own lineup. Loading children or cargo into the back seats proved awkward, and the sloping roof reduced interior space compared to traditional wagon. It was also more expensive than most other Chevrolets, pushing it out of reach for many families. Chevrolet sold just over 8,500 Nomads in 1955, and production declined further in the next 2 years. By 1958, the model was dropped altogether. It had dazzled auto show crowds but failed to find a solid foothold in the marketplace. Today, the 1955 Chevrolet Nomad is one of the most collectible Tri-5 Chevys ever built, valued for its rarity and timeless design. But in its own time, it was a beautiful miscalculation, an exotic body wrapped around a family car concept that never fully resonated with buyers. Stunning on the outside, but mismatched with real-world needs, the Nomad remains a classic case of style over substance. Number 18. 1955 Dodge La Femme. The 1955 Dodge La Femme was one of the most peculiar marketing experiments of the decade, a car specifically designed and branded for women, wrapped in pastel tones and accessories that matched its interior. It was based on the Dodge Custom Royal Lancer hardtop and featured all the bells and whistles of Dodge's top trim line, but with one unique twist. Its entire identity was geared toward femininity. Finished in a special heather rose and sapphire white paint scheme and trimmed in pink rosebud patterned fabric and gold vinyl, the La Femme was unmistakable. What set it apart even more was the inclusion of a matching accessory set. Each La Femme came with a purse, compact, lipstick case, cigarette case, lighter, and even a raincoat and umbrella, all color coordinated to the car's interior. These items were stored in special compartments in the seatbacks and glove box, further driving home the message that this car wasn't just for women, it was about women. Dodge's promotional material made it clear. The La Femme was designed with the discriminating woman in mind. Mechanically, the car was identical to other custom Royal models, offering a V8 engine and the option of Dodge's PowerFlight automatic transmission. It was powerful, smooth, and well-equipped, but its marketing niche turned out to be far too narrow. The idea that women wanted their own special edition car, separate from the standard lineup, came off as patronizing rather than empowering. Many female buyers found the concept gimmicky or condescending, and male buyers were hesitant to purchase a car so overtly styled around gender. Fewer than 1,000 units were sold in its debut year, and although Dodge tried again with a slightly revised version in 1956, the writing was on the wall. The La Femme quietly vanished from showrooms, becoming a short-lived novelty in an industry that would take decades to understand how to genuinely market to women. The 1955 Dodge La Femme remains a fascinating and well-intentioned failure. It was stunning in its audacity and detail, but it missed the mark in understanding its intended audience. Today, it's remembered more for what it tried to be than what it ever achieved. Number 17. 1954 Hudson Italia. The 1954 Hudson Italia was a daring attempt to fuse American engineering with European design flair, resulting in one of the most visually arresting failures of the decade. Born out of a partnership between Hudson and Carrozzeria Touring of Milan, Italy, the Italia was based on the compact Hudson Jet platform, but dressed in a hand-formed aluminum body that looked like it had driven straight out of a science fiction novel. With its wraparound windshield, low-slung profile, and sculpted fenders, the Italia embodied jet-age optimism and was intended to revive Hudson's image as a forward-thinking automaker. Only 26 Italias were ever built, and each one was essentially handcrafted. The styling was bold, perhaps too bold for the conservative American market of the early 1950s. Inside, the Italia continued its European theme with bucket seats, a center console, and extensive use of chrome and leather. It was unlike anything else on American roads and commanded attention wherever it appeared. Unfortunately, beauty and uniqueness were not enough to overcome practical and economic realities. The Italia was powered by a modest 114 horsepower six-cylinder engine from the Hudson Jet, which proved underwhelming given the car's exotic appearance and hefty price tag. At over $4,800, the Italia was priced higher than a Cadillac and well out of reach for most consumers. Worse still, Hudson was already on the brink of financial collapse and lacked the marketing muscle or dealer network to properly support such a niche offering. Buyers were confused by the Italia's mission. Was it a luxury car? A sports car? A concept made real? Whatever it was, they weren't buying. Hudson merged with Nash the same year to form American Motors, and the Italia project was immediately abandoned. The 1954 Hudson Italia remains a cherished collectible today due to its rarity and design pedigree. But in its own time, it was a commercial misfire, stunning to behold, yet disconnected from market demands. It was a car that promised the future but couldn't survive the present. Number 16. 1954 Kaiser Darren. The 1954 Kaiser Darren was a fiberglass-bodied sports car that arrived with a whisper of innovation and a roar of unfulfilled potential. Designed by the legendary Howard "Dutch" Darren, it was the first production fiberglass sports car in America to be announced, beating the Chevrolet Corvette to the punch even if it reached customers slightly later. Its styling was instantly memorable, with a swooping, pursed-lip grille, a long hood, and perhaps its most unique feature, doors that didn't swing out but instead slid forward into the front fenders. Built on the modest Henry J platform, the Kaiser Darren used a 90-horsepower, 6-cylinder Willys engine mated to a 3-speed manual transmission with overdrive. While the design turned heads, the performance didn't back it up. It was sluggish compared to the European sports cars it was supposed to compete with, and even the Corvette, once it received a V8, outpaced it quickly. The drivetrain was underwhelming for buyers who expected a racy, thrilling experience behind the wheel. Pricing didn't help its case. At nearly $4,000, the Kaiser Darren was expensive, costing more than the Corvette and far more than the average American sedan. Its build quality was also uneven. Early fiberglass technology made for inconsistent panel fit, and the sliding doors, though novel, were often finicky and prone to jamming. Add to that the financial instability of Kaiser Motors, and confidence in the brand's future waned fast. Production was abruptly halted after only 435 units were built. Howard Darren himself reportedly bought the remaining cars and sold them privately after installing more powerful Cadillac V8 engines, turning them into the performers he had originally envisioned. The 1954 Kaiser Darren stands today as one of the most innovative and visually charming American sports cars of the 50s. But in its own time, it was a commercial misstep, too slow, too expensive, and backed by a company with one foot out the door. Stunning in appearance, yet unable to deliver where it mattered most, the Darren remains a cautionary tale of what happens when style outpaces substance. Number 15. 1954 Nash Metropolitan. The 1954 Nash Metropolitan arrived as a bold experiment, a tiny car in a market dominated by big chrome-laden cruisers and roaring V8s. Designed in the United States but built in England by Austin for Nash Kelvinator, the Metropolitan was created with one purpose in mind: to offer thrifty, urban-friendly transportation to Americans at a time when gas prices were still low and size equaled status. At just under 13 feet in length, the Metropolitan was shorter than a Volkswagen Beetle and featured either a hardtop or convertible body style with cartoonish proportions that made it instantly endearing to some and laughable to others. Under the hood sat a diminutive 4-cylinder engine sourced from Austin, originally displacing just 1,200 cubic centimeters and later upgraded to 1,500. With only 42 to 55 horsepower depending on the year, acceleration was painfully slow, and the car struggled to keep up with highway traffic. A 3-speed manual transmission was standard, and fuel economy exceeded 40 miles per gallon, a major selling point, but not one that carried much weight in 1954 America. The styling was charming but unconventional. Two-tone paint, a smiling grille, and compact dimensions gave it a toy-like appearance. Nash even targeted women directly in their advertisements, suggesting the car was ideal for the fairer sex due to its manageable size and easy handling. While this may have been intended as a compliment, it ultimately narrowed the car's market appeal and made it seem like a novelty rather than a serious vehicle. Initial curiosity led to modest sales, but the Metropolitan never reached the breakout success Nash had hoped for. Its lack of power, limited interior space, and poor highway performance became serious drawbacks in a country that valued speed, space, and long-distance travel. Though it remained in production through American Motors into the early 1960s, it was always a fringe player. The 1954 Nash Metropolitan was undeniably ahead of its time, predicting the future rise of compact cars decades later. But in the context of its own era, it failed to resonate. A stunningly cute car with little muscle, it simply wasn't what mid-century America was ready to drive. Number 14. 1953 Oldsmobile Fiesta. The 1953 Oldsmobile Fiesta was meant to be a showstopper, a limited edition convertible that showcased the pinnacle of Oldsmobile's design and engineering prowess. Created to commemorate the brand's 50th anniversary, the Fiesta was one of General Motors' prestigious Motorama dream cars brought to life for public consumption. With its futuristic styling, upscale appointments, and advanced features, it was clear that Oldsmobile intended the Fiesta to be a halo car that would elevate the brand's image. The car was powered by Oldsmobile's renowned Rocket V8 engine, a 304 cubic inch powerhouse producing 165 horsepower. Mated to a hydromatic automatic transmission, it offered smooth and spirited performance for the era. What really set the Fiesta apart, however, was its stunning exterior design. It featured wraparound windshield glass, high-quality chrome trim, wire wheels, and a power-operated convertible top. The interior boasted leather upholstery, power windows, a power seat, and even a signal-seeking radio, luxuries not common in the early 1950s. Despite its bold presence, the Fiesta came with a price tag of over $5,700, nearly twice the cost of a standard Oldsmobile 98 convertible. This put it squarely in Cadillac territory, which created a problem. Buyers interested in spending that kind of money typically opted for the prestige of a Cadillac rather than a glorified Oldsmobile. As a result, only 458 Fiestas were built in 1953, making it one of the rarest and most short-lived Oldsmobiles ever produced. While it served its purpose as a rolling advertisement for the brand's capabilities, it failed to gain traction in the marketplace. The production was halted after just 1 year, and the Fiesta name would not return to Oldsmobile's lineup for decades. The 1953 Oldsmobile Fiesta remains a highly sought-after collector's item today, prized for its rarity and beauty. But in its own time, it was a gorgeous miscalculation, stunning to behold, yet priced and positioned out of sync with what buyers expected from Oldsmobile. It was a dream car that proved too dreamy for real-world success. Number 13. 1953 Cunningham C3. The 1953 Cunningham C3 was the ambitious product of American sportsman and millionaire Briggs Cunningham's dream to build a world-class American Grand Tour. Having already made headlines at Le Mans with his race cars, Cunningham set out to create a road-going model that could compete with the likes of Ferrari, Maserati, and Jaguar, not just on the track, but in showroom. The result was the C3, a limited production vehicle that fused American power with Italian artistry. Each C3 featured a Chrysler Firepower V8 engine, displacing 331 cubic inches and producing around 200 horsepower. The engine was paired with a 3-speed manual transmission and fitted to a tube-frame chassis, giving the car both speed and stability. The bodywork was handcrafted by Carrozzeria Vignale in Italy, offering sensuous curves, flowing lines, and intricate detailing that rivaled the best of Europe. Inside, the C3 was finished with luxurious leather, polished wood trim, and elegant simplicity that catered to the elite buyer. But for all its brilliance, the C3 was doomed from the outset by one critical flaw: its price. Selling for over $9,000, the Cunningham cost more than a Rolls-Royce and double that of a Cadillac. It was priced for royalty, but marketed by a company that lacked the brand recognition to command such figures. Additionally, the logistics of shipping bodies from Italy to the United States for final assembly made production slow and costly. This complexity restricted output, with only 25 cars ever built. The C3 never had a chance to succeed commercially, despite rave reviews and admiration from automotive enthusiasts. It was simply too expensive, too rare, and too impractical for mass-market appeal. Cunningham eventually focused more on racing than on car production, and the C3 became a fascinating footnote in American automotive history. The 1953 Cunningham C3 remains one of the most beautiful and exclusive cars ever produced in the United States. But its breathtaking design and performance couldn't overcome its financial unsustainability. It was a stunning car that failed miserably, not for lack of excellence, but for dreaming too far beyond its reach. Number 12. 1953 Kaiser Dragon. The 1953 Kaiser Dragon was a luxury car like no other, part marketing marvel, part design curiosity, and ultimately, a case study in style-driven failure. At a glance, the Dragon stood out with a unique vinyl roof treatment called Dragon Skin, a textured pattern meant to resemble reptile hide, setting it apart from the chrome-drenched competition of the early 50s. The rest of the car featured ornate, gold-plated trim, signature emblems, and an opulent interior designed to dazzle post-war buyers, craving individuality and comfort. Based on the Kaiser Manhattan, the Dragon was a fully loaded sedan with upscale intentions. It offered luxury features like power steering, a deluxe heating and ventilation system, automatic transmission, and a fully soundproof cabin. The dashboard carried a gold-tone nameplate that could be personalized with the buyer's name, an unusual touch in an era where most cars were cookie-cutter. The interior came upholstered in bamboo vinyl and Laguna cloth, all aimed at evoking a sense of exotic refinement. Unfortunately, all the pageantry couldn't hide the car's underwhelming mechanicals. The Dragon used a 6-cylinder engine, producing 118 horsepower, decent but underpowered for a vehicle marketed as a premium offering. In a market increasingly dominated by V8 performance and sleeker styling, the Dragon felt more like a stylish oddball than a serious contender. Its design leaned more toward flamboyance than elegance, and while it appealed to a niche group of buyers, it failed to resonate with the broader market. Priced at over $3,800, the Dragon competed against the likes of Buick and Oldsmobile, yet lacked the engineering pedigree and performance to justify the price tag. Only 1,277 units were built in 1953, making it a commercial flop despite its visual appeal. The 1953 Kaiser Dragon is remembered today as a bold, eccentric attempt to redefine luxury on a limited budget. It was stunning in appearance, rich in features, but ultimately misaligned with what luxury buyers actually wanted. A reptilian fashion statement with no real bite, the Dragon remains one of the most glamorous failures of the decade. Number 11. 1953 Hudson Jet. The 1953 Hudson Jet was a critical gamble for the Hudson Motor Car Company, one that would ultimately prove to be a financial disaster. As larger automakers like Ford and Chevrolet dominated the full-size car segment, Hudson, a smaller independent, decided to shift focus toward compact cars, believing that a smaller, more affordable sedan would carve out a new market niche. Thus, the Jet was born, conceived as a high-quality compact that could deliver both refinement and efficiency in a shrunken package. From an engineering standpoint, the Jet had its strengths. It was powered by a 102 horsepower inline-six engine, which offered respectable performance for its class. It featured unit body construction for increased rigidity, and the suspension and handling were praised for providing a relatively smooth ride. Inside, the Jet was surprisingly well appointed, with quality materials and amenities that surpassed what was typical for an economy car. However, the Jet's downfall lay primarily in its uninspired styling and misplaced pricing. Despite being built from the ground up, the final design was dictated heavily by Hudson's then-president A.E. Barrett, who overrode the stylists in favor of conservative, upright proportions. The result was a boxy, high-roofed car that lacked the visual appeal of its sleeker competitors. Consumers found it plain and awkward, and in a marketplace increasingly swayed by chrome, fins, and flair, the Jet simply didn't excite. Moreover, the Jet was not as inexpensive as buyers had hoped. Its price tag hovered near that of larger 6-cylinder sedans from Chevrolet and Ford, which made it a tough sell. In its first year, only about 21,000 units were sold, a figure far below what Hudson needed to recoup its multi-million-dollar investment in tooling and development. By 1954, the Jet was discontinued, and soon after, Hudson was merged into American Motors Corporation. The 1953 Hudson Jet was a compact car, built with good intentions and decent engineering, but it failed to capture consumer enthusiasm. It was a stunning misfire, costly, bland, and ultimately fatal for one of America's once proud automakers. Number 10. 1953 Chevrolet Corvette, Cone. The 1953 Chevrolet Corvette marked the birth of an American icon, but its debut year was anything but a roaring success. Introduced at General Motors' Motorama show in New York's Waldorf Astoria Hotel, the Corvette stunned audiences with its sleek fiberglass body, wraparound windshield, and low-slung roadster proportions. It was the first mass-produced American sports car and a bold attempt by Chevrolet to offer something that could compete with the stylish roadsters coming from Europe. On looks alone, the Corvette was a home run. However, beneath the fiberglass skin, the car told a different story. Chevrolet rushed the Corvette into production and used parts from its existing lineup to save costs. It was powered by a 150 horsepower Blue Flame inline-six engine borrowed from the standard Chevrolet sedan, paired with a 2-speed Powerglide automatic transmission. For a car marketed as a high-performance roadster, this was underwhelming. The Corvette couldn't match the performance or refinement of British and Italian sports cars, and critics quickly took notice. Chevrolet only produced 300 Corvettes in that first year, and despite all the initial hype, many of them went unsold. The high price, over $3,400, combined with disappointing performance, left buyers confused about what the Corvette was supposed to be. It looked fast, but wasn't. It wore a Chevrolet badge, but cost more than some Cadillac. To make matters worse, build quality on the early fiberglass bodies was inconsistent, leading to rattles, leaks, and ill-fitting panels. Dealers had difficulty convincing customers to take a chance on such an unconventional car, and internal voices at General Motors began to question whether the Corvette had a future at all. The 1953 Chevrolet Corvette is now revered as a classic, but at the time, it was a commercial flop. It was stunning to look at, undeniably groundbreaking, yet fatally flawed in execution. It wouldn't be until 1955, when a small block V8 was introduced, that the Corvette would finally begin to live up to its promise. Until then, the original Corvette stood as a beautiful but failed attempt at building an American sports car. Number 9. 1952 Sears Allstate. The 1952 Sears Allstate was one of the most unusual automotive experiments of the decade, a car you could literally buy from a department store catalog. Sold through Sears, Roebuck & Company, the Allstate was a slightly reworked version of the Kaiser Frazer Henry J, rebadged and marketed to American consumers as a no-frills, affordable automobile. In theory, it made sense. Sears already sold everything from washing machines to houses, so why not cars? But while the Allstate was novel in concept, it failed spectacularly in practice. Mechanically, the Allstate was nearly identical to the Henry J, with a choice of either a 4-cylinder or 6-cylinder engine, both supplied by Willys. It came with minimal standard features: no armrests, no ashtray, no trunk lid, and no glove compartment, since it was designed to be as affordable and simple as possible. The idea was that the average family could buy and maintain this car with ease, thanks to its simplicity and Sears' extensive service network through its auto centers. However, these cost-cutting choices made the car feel cheap, even by early 50s standards. Cosmetically, Sears gave the Allstate some unique trim pieces, special badging, and slightly different grille designs, but it wasn't enough to mask the car's origins. Most buyers saw through the rebranding and weren't interested in buying a car from a catalog, especially when dealerships were offering more compelling alternatives. The lack of a conventional sales and service infrastructure also became a problem. Sears stores weren't equipped to deliver or maintain cars the same way traditional car dealers were. Only about 2,300 Allstates were sold in 1952 and 1953 combined. Sears quietly pulled the plug on the program, and the Allstate faded into obscurity. The 1952 Sears Allstate remains one of the quirkiest failures in automotive history. It was stunning in its ambition and memorable in its marketing, but in the end, Americans weren't ready to pick up their groceries, a new refrigerator, and a brand new car in the same trip. It was a retail revolution that never quite took off. Number 8. 1951 Muntz Jet. The 1951 Muntz Jet was the bold creation of Earl "Madman" Muntz, a flamboyant entrepreneur known for selling televisions, radios, and cars with outrageous advertising tactics. Determined to build a world-class personal luxury car, Muntz purchased the rights to a prototype sports coupe developed by race car builder Frank Curtis and turned it into a 4-seat hardtop convertible aimed at affluent buyers. The Muntz Jet was sleek, powerful, and undeniably ahead of its time. Built on an extended version of the original Curtis chassis, the Muntz Jet featured a steel body and was initially powered by a Cadillac V8, later replaced by a Lincoln V8 to reduce costs. With up to 160 horsepower under the hood, it offered impressive performance for a full-size personal car in the early 50s. The interior was lavish by contemporary standards, outfitted with leather upholstery, a custom dashboard, and aircraft-style toggle switches. Muntz also claimed his cars were crash-tested and came with seatbelts, rare and forward-thinking for the era. Despite its innovation and celebrity clientele, Frank Sinatra and Mickey Rooney were among owners, the Muntz Jet struggled in the marketplace. The car was assembled largely by hand, and production quality varied greatly. Manufacturing was inefficient, and the switch from aluminum to heavier steel added complexity. At over $5,000, it was priced higher than many Cadillacs and Lincolns, yet came from a company with no established dealer network or service reputation. Only around 394 Muntz Jets were built between 1951 and 1954. Muntz reportedly lost about $1,000 on every car sold, a financial model that even the most flamboyant salesman couldn't sustain. The project folded quietly, and the Muntz Jet disappeared from the road, becoming one of the rarest American cars of its era. The 1951 Muntz Jet was stunning in concept, stylish, powerful, and daring, but it failed miserably in execution. Too expensive, too complex, and backed by a company built more on showmanship than structure, it remains a fascinating relic of post-war ambition and automotive eccentricity. Number 7. 1951 Nash Healey. The 1951 Nash Healey was one of America's earliest attempts to compete with Europe's best sports cars, yet despite its sophisticated pedigree and exotic appeal, it failed to gain serious traction in the marketplace. Born from a collaboration between Nash Motors and British automaker Donald Healey, the Nash Healey was an international effort that combined American reliability, British engineering, and Italian styling. At a time when sports cars were beginning to capture the imagination of post-war drivers, this transatlantic creation seemed poised for success. The car was powered by a modified version of Nash's inline 6-cylinder engine, enlarged and tuned by Healey to produce around 125 horsepower. It was mated to a 3-speed manual transmission with overdrive and mounted in a lightweight chassis designed for nimble handling. Initially, the Nash Healey featured aluminum bodywork crafted by Healey in England, but by 1952, the design was handed off to Italian coach builder Pininfarina, who gave it a sleeker, more refined appearance. The new styling brought elegance, with flowing lines, chrome accents, and a sophisticated European silhouette. Despite its beauty and impressive heritage, the Nash Healey had several obstacles stacked against it. For one, it was expensive, priced at over $4,000. It cost more than a Cadillac, and nearly double what a basic Corvette would cost when it debuted 2 years later. Performance was good, but not exceptional, especially compared to Jaguars and Ferraris in the same price bracket. And while its hybrid origins were a selling point for some, others were skeptical of a car assembled on 3 continents, with complicated logistics that led to high production costs and limited availability. Between 1951 and 1954, fewer than 500 Nash Healeys were built. Though it competed at Le Mans and the Mille Miglia and was respected among enthusiasts, the car never reached commercial success. The 1951 Nash Healey was stunning in concept and cosmopolitan in spirit, but ultimately, it failed miserably in the showroom. It was too expensive, too rare, and lacked the brand cachet needed to truly thrive. Today, it's a collector's gem, and a reminder that even the best ideas can stumble without the right market fit. Number 6. 1951 Kaiser Frazer Henry J. The 1951 Kaiser Frazer Henry J was conceived as America's answer to the post-war demand for an affordable, no-frills compact car, but it ultimately became one of the most disappointing sales stories of the decade. Named after industrialist Henry J. Kaiser, the car was built to be inexpensive, easy to maintain, and efficient, ideals that, on paper, made sense for a recovering economy. However, in execution, the Henry J failed to deliver the value or appeal that buyers expected. To keep costs low, Kaiser cut corners in ways that quickly became glaring to consumers. The base Henry J came without a glove box, without armrests, and even without an opening trunk lid. Owners had to access the trunk space by folding down the rear seats. Most models lacked a ventilation system, and the styling was overly plain, especially when compared to the more attractive and fully featured cars offered by the Big Three. Buyers who were intrigued by the low starting price of just under $1,300 quickly realized that even modest upgrades pushed the car's cost into the range of better-equipped competitors. Mechanically, the Henry J was offered with either a 4-cylinder or 6-cylinder engine sourced from Willys, with horsepower ranging from 68 to 80. While fuel-efficient, the car was underpowered and struggled on highways, an issue as Americans increasingly embraced long-distance travel. Build quality was also inconsistent, and Kaiser lacked the dealer network and brand loyalty that its larger rivals had cultivated. Though sales started with some optimism, public perception quickly turned. Many buyers felt the Henry J looked and drove like a cut-rate product, and within 2 years, demand had plummeted. By 1954, the model was discontinued, and the company soon merged with Willys Overland, eventually fading into obscurity. The 1951 Kaiser Frazer Henry J was a car that aimed for mass-market appeal but missed the mark. It was stunning in its ambition to provide basic transportation to everyone, yet it failed miserably by delivering too little in a market that still valued style, comfort, and pride of ownership. Number 5. 1951 Frazer Manhattan Convertible. The 1951 Frazer Manhattan Convertible was one of the final gasps of a once promising independent automaker, and while it was stunning in design and concept, it failed to connect with the market. As part of the Frazer brand under the Kaiser Frazer Corporation, the Manhattan Convertible was built to showcase luxury and innovation in a distinctive 4-door drop-top format. In fact, it was the only 4-door convertible offered by an American automaker that year, a bold move in a market increasingly dominated by 2-door coupes and hardtops. Visually, the Manhattan Convertible was a handsome vehicle. Its flowing fenders, wide grille, and tall roofline gave it an elegant, upright stance that appealed to buyers seeking a dignified yet open-air motoring experience. Inside, it featured upscale materials, a full array of dashboard instruments, and plush upholstery designed to rival more expensive offerings from Cadillac or Lincoln. Mechanically, it came equipped with a reliable 115 horsepower inline-6 engine paired with a Hydra-matic automatic transmission, advanced technology for its time. But despite its upscale aspirations and unique configuration, the Frazer Manhattan Convertible was burdened by poor timing and limited resources. The company had already announced the end of the Frazer brand, so buyers were reluctant to purchase a car from a manufacturer that was on its way out. The price didn't help either. At over $3,000, it cost more than many better-known luxury alternatives. And while the idea of a 4-door convertible was novel, most consumers preferred the sportier image and lower price tag of traditional 2-door convertibles. Only 131 units of the 1951 Frazer Manhattan Convertible were ever sold, making it one of the rarest American production cars of the decade. Its exclusivity today gives it significant collector value, but at the time, it was a commercial disaster. The 1951 Frazer Manhattan Convertible was a beautiful failure, graceful, comfortable, and innovative, but ultimately unsupported by consumer demand or corporate backing. It stands today as a symbol of how bold ideas alone aren't enough to save a fading brand. Number 4. 1950 Crosley Hotshot. The 1950 Crosley Hotshot was one of the most daringly different cars of its time. A tiny, lightweight, two-seat sports car designed to offer Americans an affordable taste of European-style motoring. Manufactured by the Crosley Corporation, which had made its name building compact, economical vehicles throughout the 1940s, the Hotshot was intended to be the crown jewel in the company's lineup. At first glance, it had all the ingredients for success: low cost, sporty appearance, and surprising performance for its size. Weighing in at just under 1,200 pounds and measuring barely 12 feet long, the Hotshot was among the smallest production cars ever made in America. It was powered by a 44 cubic inch four-cylinder engine producing 26 horsepower, hardly impressive on paper, but enough to make it nimble thanks to its feather-like construction. The engine, known as the Cobra for copper brazed, was advanced in design, featuring overhead camshaft technology unusual in low-cost American vehicles of the time. Paired with a 3-speed manual transmission and a low center of gravity, the Hotshot handled like a go-kart and proved surprisingly fun to drive. The car gained brief notoriety for its class win in the inaugural Sebring Endurance Race in 1950, earning it performance credibility few small cars enjoy. Yet that success did little to boost public enthusiasm. American buyers were still deeply entrenched in the bigger is better mentality, and the Hotshot, with its minimalist styling and lack of comfort features, looked and felt out of place. It had no doors, no weather protection, and was offered in extremely limited color choices. Despite its low price, under $1,000, sales were weak. Mechanical issues plagued the early engines, especially with reliability and cooling. Crosley tried to improve quality over time, but by 1952, the company ceased car production altogether. The 1950 Crosley Hotshot was a trailblazer in concept, America's first post-war sports car, but it failed to capture the imagination of its audience. Too small, too Spartan, and too ahead of its time, it remains a charming but cautionary tale of what happens when innovation races too far ahead of public desire. Number 3. 1956 Packard Executive. The 1956 Packard Executive was introduced as a stopgap model meant to bridge the widening gap between the lower-tier Clipper line and Packard's more luxurious senior models. It was a car born of desperation, as the once prestigious Packard brand found itself rapidly losing market share, identity, and consumer confidence in the wake of declining sales and its uneasy merger with Studebaker in 1954. Positioned as an affordable luxury option, the Executive was essentially a dressed-up Clipper with just enough chrome and trim to justify its place under the Packard banner. From a styling perspective, the Executive featured Packard's distinctive grille and tailfin-inspired rear fenders, along with unique name, badging, and upscale interior appointments. Mechanically, it carried a 375 cubic inch V8 engine, producing 275 horsepower, paired with Packard's twin Ultramatic automatic transmission. On paper, it offered a compelling combination of style, performance, and comfort. Yet, it entered the market at a time when the Packard brand had already begun to lose its allure. The biggest problem was perception. Buyers quickly realized that the Executive was little more than a Clipper with a new nameplate. Enthusiasts who once saw Packard as a symbol of innovation and prestige now viewed it as a fading company clinging to its former glory. Compounding the issue, Packard dealers were dwindling, and corporate leadership was in turmoil. Sales were underwhelming, with fewer than 2,800 Executives built during its brief production run in 1956. Just months after its release, the Detroit plant was shut down, and Packard production was consolidated with Studebaker's operations in South Bend. There would be no 1957 Packard Executive. The 1956 Packard Executive was a car that embodied a brand in decline. It was introduced with hope but landed with a thud, failing to convince either loyalists or new buyers. Though it wore the Packard crest, it lacked the soul and innovation that once defined the mark, making it a final, stunning failure in a once-storied legacy. Number 2. 1953 Buick Skylark. The 1953 Buick Skylark was introduced as a limited production halo car meant to celebrate Buick's 50th anniversary, and it arrived with style, power, and a price tag that turned heads for all the wrong reasons. Based on the popular Roadmaster platform, the Skylark was more than just a rebadged convertible. It was a bold statement of Buick's design prowess during the golden age of American automobiles. It featured a chopped windshield, custom full-wheel openings, wire wheels, and sleek rear fenders, all contributing to a lowered and sportier silhouette. Under the hood, the Skylark was powered by Buick's newly introduced Nailhead V8 engine, a 321 cubic inch powerhouse, producing 188 horsepower. It was paired with a Dynaflow automatic transmission, offering smooth but leisurely acceleration. The car came loaded with amenities like power windows, power seats, power steering, and power brakes, technologies that were still novelties to most drivers in 1953. Yet, despite its beauty and performance, the Skylark failed to resonate with buyers in large numbers. Priced at over $5,000, it cost nearly double the price of a base Buick and more than many Cadillacs. For that kind of money, most consumers opted for the prestige of a Cadillac or a Lincoln rather than a Buick, which was traditionally viewed as a mid-tier brand. And while the Skylark was visually stunning, it lacked the brand separation necessary to justify its premium status. Buick managed to sell just 1,690 units of the Skylark in 1953. Though it continued in a toned-down form for another year, the model was soon shelved, and the name wouldn't return until the late 1960s in a very different form. The 1953 Buick Skylark is now considered a classic, admired for its craftsmanship, styling, and rarity. But in its time, it was a commercial miscalculation, too expensive for its brand, too soon for its concept. It was a stunning failure that proved even the most beautiful cars need the right market position to succeed. Number 1. 1957 Rambler Rebel, fuel-injected. The 1957 Rambler Rebel was a groundbreaking car in many ways, and had it reached its full potential, it might have reshaped the performance landscape of the late 1950s. Produced by American Motors Corporation, the Rebel was a mid-sized sedan with the heart of a muscle car, boasting a high-compression, 327 cubic inch V8 engine that delivered an impressive 255 horsepower in its standard carbureted form. But what truly set it apart was its optional Bendix electrojector fuel injection system, a technological marvel that promised to push output up to 288 horsepower. This made the Rambler Rebel the first American car to offer electronic fuel injection as a factory option, beating both Chevrolet and Chrysler to the punch. The system was compact, futuristic, and boasted quicker throttle response and more consistent fuel delivery than traditional carburetors. In theory, this setup should have made the Rebel one of the fastest and most advanced sedans on the market. Unfortunately, reality didn't match the hype. The Bendix electrojector system was rushed to market and proved unreliable during cold starts and extended use. American Motors, realizing the technology wasn't yet ready for mass production, quietly recalled all fuel-injected models before they reached customers and replaced the systems with conventional carburetors. As a result, virtually no true fuel-injected Rambler Rebels ever made it into public hands. Even without fuel injection, the Rebel was a fast car for its size, capable of going from 0 to 60 in just over 7 seconds, exceptional for a family sedan in 1957. But its plain styling and AMC's budget-conscious image prevented it from gaining traction with performance buyers. Only 1,500 Rebels were built, and most consumers never even knew about the revolutionary feature that could have made it famous. The 1957 Rambler Rebel was stunning in its ambition, daring to introduce technology years ahead of its time. But without proper execution and public awareness, it failed miserably, becoming one of the most fascinating what-ifs in American automotive history.